Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today, it's Pat and I back in the studio once again, and this week we're going to talk about a couple of different things, but primarily we're going to be focused on our upcoming mini airsoft event called Operation Neon Sunrise, and what that's actually going to mean for Pat, because Pat is going to be playing this event, and I'll be explaining that a little bit as well. So, the other thing we want to talk about is some of the different moving parts of Airsoft for us recently. So, we've had the opportunity to play a little bit of Airsoft since the last time that we recorded a podcast together. And that, of course, is rife with, good stuff that needs to be improved on. So, I thought we'd take the opportunity to talk about that. So,
things to tinker with.
Yeah, exactly.
As always.
And Pat and I were very fortunate that there was a local guy who was offloading a whole lot of replicas that were very, very inexpensive, and they were good quality. So we were able to acquire a bunch of different ones. And one of the things that I was able to do very recently was with one of those replicas, which was a VFC Avalon, like a full metal. I was finally able to get my Kythera set up into a proper VFC gearbox, into a proper VFC body, which is quite likely going to resolve almost all the issues that I was having with my, I don't want to say janky, but certainly make do setup previously using what we had on hand, right?
Yeah, I mean, it should, this is not to say that you have to put a Kythera in a VFC, just that they're designed to go in them, like Polarstar's stuff is spec'd for VFC bodies, which means they're just slightly easier to install and operate. Like, it isn't, mandatory, but it removes some of the fiddling.
Yeah, and this gun is used technically, but for better or for worse, like it's basically essentially brand new.
Yeah.
So like when I opened that gearbox, when I opened that gearbox, that warranty void seal, I was the one who tore that. It wasn't torn before I opened the gearbox, right?
I enjoy that feeling.
Yeah. So I mean, you ripped out all the internals and all this kind of stuff. I did get to see my first quick change spring setup, which was kind of a pain because I had to get the angle grinder out, but that's a whole nother story. I think the cool thing that I will say is, by virtue of the fact of having been around Pat while he was teching, it's kind of like if you just watch a lot of cooking shows, like you absorb some cooking technique through osmosis. Or you get the sense that you're doing the right thing, right? It's like, wait, should I put the butter in now? Yeah, it seems like a good idea. I've seen them. So same sort of situation. I mean, I've been doing this with you for so long now that the amount of reassuring that I require in order to be able to complete some of these pretty basic, I would say, operations is very low. So when we were talking, you were like, hey, I can come over and I can help you. And I was kind of like, actually, you know what? I think I got this. Like, we talked about it. I watched a video. Thankfully, we also have the Discord, and the people there are super helpful. They're super helpful in general. But one thing that I think that is really great about them is they are always looking for videos, the same kind of like video tutorials like we are. So chances are they found it and they can link you to the good one, so you can sort of bypass a whole lot of like the Google searching. So I was able to just find out really quickly to be like, no, in this situation, what you need to do, Dremel out the gearbox, grind down the piston guide, and then you're good to go. That's exactly what I did, and put it together. Shoots fine, consistent, no issues so far. Fingers crossed. But it's
one of those things where, having access to the Discord definitely minimizes some of the research complication.
Yeah,
and just any of you guys know how to do this? Oh, cool.
And having all the tools on hand, because thankfully my brother was helping me out with another project outside of the Airsoft realm, and his angle grinder and all his equipment was right there. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to take care of this real quick, as opposed to if I had to do it by hand, it would have taken
the angle grinder probably is much quicker than the Dremel.
Yeah. And I mean, I didn't break any cutoff discs. It just took literally 5 minutes. Put on my apron to make sure I didn't catch anything on fire, and off you go. So that's been the biggest change for me, and realistically, like, it's not really a change. Like, the length of replica that I have is basically the same. Like, the inner barrel pokes out through the flash hider, so I might put a suppressor on it or I might not. I don't really care. I have the barrel extender that I used to have on there before, so it's fine. Um, and it's brand new. I mean, it does all the cool brand new stuff that you want, but it's still exactly the same barrel, the same hop up. I haven't even I put the max hop up in there as well. I haven't even tinkered with that because I figure I want to see if there's any other issues with it in this gearbox, which or in this body. But again, it's all meant to work together in this particular form factor. So I'm really, I'm not putting my eggs all in this basket. And even if I did, it wasn't a very expensive basket. Let's be honest. Um, but yeah, hopefully that solves that for me. Um, but
Yeah,
on your end,
it
sorry,
should
go ahead.
present a real minimum of issues anyway. Like
Yeah,
anything we
exactly.
have to do should be pretty quick and chill. So
And speaking of minimum issues, this is not has not been your experience when most recently when we hit the field with your, especially with your 249. I mean, that's been sort of a project gun that's been on the go for you for, oh,
two
I
years,
mean,
pretty
close on
much.
a year and a half. Yeah, 2 years,
A
really?
year, a
That
year
long?
of HPAing
Yeah.
and a year of just sort of like fiddling around with the non-HPA version.
So the
Um,
HPA part now seems to work fine. Like you were using it at the last game that we played. Were you using some of the EPM1 mags in
yeah,
it, or?
so it's currently running great on every mid cap I own, which is EPMs, EPM1s, and KSC metal mags from ages ago.
Oh yeah. Oh my god,
Um,
those things are ancient.
but like the only thing it doesn't like is the couple of cheapo mag brand um, PM, like polymer mags from
Oh
ages and ages ago. But
yeah,
they're old enough that like I'm pretty sure all of my guns are like, yeah, this spring's fuck. This spring is terrible. Don't use it. Like,
yeah,
um, so I'm not super concerned about that.
yeah. But those are older than some of the players in our
Yeah,
community. So I
exactly, right?
think,
Like
yeah,
I suspect the answer is actually that I can just toss those in the garbage, that they're just defunct.
yeah, pretty
They don't owe me
much.
anything. um so um it's the big 249 problem is that my box mag just won't feed. Um I've done a bunch of testing. It essentially comes down to the box mag does not create sufficient pressure behind the BBs to actually load them.
Mhm.
Now, the box mag is 2 years old, so it's not like in super good shape, and I'm starting to feel like they're a lot more consumable than I want a $200 item to be. So at the moment, I have sort of two options, which are put a 250 round EPM one in it and giggle, which so
Yeah.
far is primo. Like, um, in an environment where most people aren't running high rate of fire and aren't running really 250 round mid caps, like it'll keep people's heads down long enough for most of what we need, I suspect.
Hmm.
Um, so this coming weekend, I'm going to run it for a couple of games and see how it performs. I'm probably going to drive out to somewhere and probably the field and just like dial in the hop up and make sure it's working as well as I think it is sometime in the week.
Yeah.
That's mostly because I'm sick of taking it there and tinkering with it during games. Like,
That's 100% legit.
I need to, or I want to be playing, not messing around with the gun. So I want to make sure it's working as well as I can. I'm really happy with that function. As far as the feeding issues go, it's basically a buy some 3D printed parts and hope I can fix it, which seems iffy. Buy another box mag and see if just having one that's not old and janky fixes it,
Hmm.
which is seeming more appealing. Just in a like, pick a brand that I haven't tried, try it. The folks who make the Bulgir, they're a Russian company, I think, make both fancy hop-up units for them. They're on a 3rd gen now, and I think mine's a 2nd, but like it works great. I'm happy
Hmm.
with it. They make drop-in kits to modify your box mag, or they make really cool box mags that require some tinkering with wiring, but like because I have it HPA'd, it's pretty chill. That is a potential option, but it's not a potential option for right now because nowhere in Canada has them.
Yeah.
It's just I can't I have the time right now that if I could order and receive one of their mag kits, I could get it, install it, and probably have it running for the operation game. But essentially, the closest place that I can get them is in the States, and the shipping is an extra 40% of the cost of the gun, or 40% of the cost of the box, which is not feasible.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you were to order it today, the likelihood of it being here by the time that the mini op rolls around is pretty low.
Yeah, like
So
it's one
it's
of
a lot of
those.
expense for not no real. I mean, it's not there's no benefit, but it doesn't help you right now.
Yeah, and like I could, I do have time. Like if I ordered it in the next 24 hours, probably I would get a box mag from whatever manufacturer.
Hmm.
It's just a matter of, do I want to drop $250 on a box mag and getting it shipped here? When I've now run 3 different ones through it, and they've all been trash.
Yeah.
You
Although
know,
this was the only one you ran on HPA, right?
yes, but like they're the same. um, Having taken some of them apart to be like, is there something different in here? Nope, they're the same.
Mhm.
So I know Hapgood has at least one, so I might bum one of his and try to get it to work, depending on how he feels about that, um, rather than ordering one right now. Matt on our Discord has definitely been very clear. He's like, yeah, just buy EPMs and run them. That works better. And realistically, $250 is like 6 or 7 EPM ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and I feel like the mag change on the M4 mag is not super hard. I also weird things in terms of looking into stuff. The like you wind to the bottom high caps seem to actually feed fine mostly.
Yep,
Um, so like if I want a 500 round box that I can sort of fiddle with, that's arguably almost a better choice.
definitely.
Like not than the EPMs. I actually think 2 EPMs with 250 rounds each is probably better than the 500 round high cap. Partly because rattle rattle, but like
Yeah, I mean, like, not that you don't rattle with a big box mag either. I
oh
mean,
yeah,
I
totally,
think if you can try another box mag and have it work, then that's great. But if you try another box mag that's a different brand or a different make or whatever, and it still doesn't work, at that point you can be pretty certain that it's just not going to work, and then you might as well just do the EPM one thing. Especially since like I've got one, you can use it. You know what I mean? Like it's accessible for you,
totally, and like
um, and it's not $200 and something dollars
yeah,
to
exactly, right? Like
not
the
fix the problem, right?
so like another, I guess to be clear, just so that people aren't like bleh about the price. So at the moment, I can get another A&K one that's exactly the same one I just used, but new, for 140 plus tax and shipping, which is gross. um, or I can get a Mag brand one for 200.
Mhm.
Um, and those are basically the only boxes that are in stock currently anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and A, I'm not super convinced on the A&K one, and B, the A&K ones have a really crappy rechargeable battery that you can't replace, whereas the Mag one just takes a D cell, and that seems better. But they're
Yeah.
$200 plus tax and shipping, and that makes me want to throw up a
You
little.
can also wire them to a lipo or something like that too,
So I
right?
did that with the with the A&K one. I've been playing with it a little. So I've been running it. I was running it when last testing on a 7.4 volt little tiny HPA lipo because I figured that was the safest thing for it. And then I got pissed off with it on Friday and tried it on an 11.1 just to see what would happen, which was hilarious. Don't do it if you have one and it works at all. It is no good, but was funny. um, and like the trick that the thing I learned doing that is just, yeah, it will, it increases the rate at which the thing that's feeding BB spins, but it doesn't really increase the rate at which um, the clutch can actually feed BBs or push BBs. So it doesn't provide you a whole lot of benefit.
Mhm.
Um, with the HPA setup, like I've been able to mess around with like the nozzle dwell and stuff, which allows you to get mags that don't feed as well to feed fine. and that isn't working or wasn't working with this particular drum. So I'm assuming the drum is defunct.
I think this is something that you should talk to Chris about, because Chris, I mean, aside from the fact that he like 3D print stuff at his work all the time, they deal with a lot of this type of electronics and mini motors and all this kind of stuff. He might have some like actually like if you're at the point where you're just gonna bin it, right? He's like he might have some I hate to say it, more destructive ideas that could potentially be a little skookum, but might work just fine in the interim. So just the thoughts, because he might be like, oh yeah, no, we could juice this up with this like high torque motor that we have that would fit the motor in the, I don't know, right? Like,
So, I mean, possibly, and I will reach out just for the fun of it. Like, at a minimum, he will probably enjoy, the phrase, hey, do you want to do mad science to this?
yeah, exactly.
So, for where I'm at in terms of it, like, it's definitely, maybe not definitely, but like fairly defunct at this point.
Mhm.
I reached a point where I was like, all right, this is clearly expendable to me at this point. Let's see if we can do something about it. If it is better, great. And if it's done, then it's done, whatever. And yeah, it's not like a brutally complicated little setup in there. But the ability of the motor, at least, isn't currently the problem. Now, in fairness, it's possible that we could find a new way to actuate feeding. The Bulgare ones are basically just replacing a bunch of parts of the mechanism that are normally plastic with aluminum, like,
Mhm.
which basically allows it to just push a little harder without damaging itself.
Yeah.
You know, Bulgare also does conversion kits, which is sort of like, oh yeah, I can just gut the box and put it in the box.
Mhm.
So like that's maybe an option. But yeah, letting Chris play with it is definitely a fun idea at
Yeah.
minimum, right?
But this is all really interesting, because this is also in the context and the backdrop of like the op that we have coming up, where it's the first time that we are introducing replica like weapon classes, right? I'm saying weapon in air quotes because of course it's airsoft, but like the benefit, or one of the things that we were asking is like, okay, well, if you wanted to do an SSW, each for 10 players on your team, you can have two, right? Because at like bigger milsims, they do per squad, but like we're not going to be doing that because we don't have enough players. So it's going to be like for every 10 players, you can have two SSWs and one designated marksman, right? And so you're the only guys who are going to be able to run on auto when you're using the SSW.
Yep. I'm like,
And and we asked that it be an actual SSW, a replica of an SSW, so like a 249 or RPK or PKM, like whatever. Um,
yeah,
and so having a box is part of that aesthetic. It's not. I mean, we're not at a point where we're going to be like, oh, you don't have a box, you can't run it, or like, hey, you don't have enough SSWs. I have a box mag for my M4. No, you can't be an SSW. Like, we're not going to be that strict, but it certainly is something that would be ideal to figure out, right?
yeah, I mean, um, honestly, at a bare minimum, the phrase "this is my LMG and I'm running it on M4 mags" feels a little
Yeah.
like
Desperate.
you
Desperate.
know I'm like part of the like we're all here to play fashion a little bit, right? Like
Mhm.
and it offends my spirit to not have the box mag on there and look proper, but like um does it offend my spirit $200 right now?
No.
Not really. Especially like so at time of recording, the op is in not this weekend but the following weekend. um so like I can either focus on making sure the thing feeds and runs as nicely as I can possibly manage with the mags that I have and just make people sad, which is my current
Mhm.
plan. Or I can spend a bunch of money and hope that the courier and or postal service actually delivers things on time, which is pretty iffy. We're an island, it's not great.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's fabulous and other times it's like so I'm not really feeling it. And like I still feel really strongly that the way our standard Saturday games are set up, the LMG is really, really fun for like 2 games a day, and then I'm basically effectively not able to run it the rest of the time.
Correct. That's a very good point.
So like I took on the project because I wanted to learn how to do it from a tech point of view.
Mhm.
Um, I'm pretty happy with what I've got it doing from a tech point of view. The box mag piece seems to be, and like, please, by the way, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh no, I know like, this brand of box mag will work fine. Like, just, this is a thing you can do that you haven't thought of. Awesome, let me know. Um, you know, but um, I've run it with a couple of boxes and I'm having the same problems. And Hapgood has Mark 46 that he's also got running pretty well, and it's also having the same problems with all the box mags that we have. So between feedback from other players in the community and our experiences, I'm starting to feel like it's a box mag problem.
Yeah, yeah.
And like, if I want an LMG that has a drum and I'm really like super dedicated to that, I'll either pick up the Bulgir one and do that over the winter when I have loads of downtime, and maybe or hopefully have a little bit more like expendable airsoft money that I want to spend on tinkering with a single gun that's limited use except for scenarios.
Yeah.
And like, hey, if Jordan and I are both running on the same team and both running LMGs for the mini op, then which is currently the plan, like to be clear,
Yeah.
um, then it's possible that like at the end of the day we both are like, okay, well that was really really fun, and we both look at, you know, buying a Bulgir one and putting it in and getting it like chop chop perfect. And if we're doing that, then at least we can split shipping,
It's true.
like because the like Bulgir's website will sell me one. I just don't like the shipping from it at all. Or I'll just accept that like, running it for a few games at a time with EPMs that feed is allowing me to put a lot of fire down at a
So
pretty high
are you
rate.
going are
Like,
you going to be reducing the rate of fire though? Given that you have less available ammo overall, like per mag?
so I didn't have it set very high in the first place.
Okay.
um, yeah, I guess I haven't really talked to Phil about this. Because chiefly I try to be a good person about my airsoft gear. The last time we played, when you were like tucked into sort of like deep into some bushes behind me, and I was firing at someone on full auto.
Yeah.
That's the standard rate of fire. That's not turned up. That's turned down a little.
Right. Yeah, for sure. That
um,
didn't sound particularly fast to me. Like it sounded. Don't get me wrong. Like it sounded fast, but it didn't sound like just Burt or whatever.
oh
Like
yeah,
it was
no.
certainly like AEG sort of full auto fast, maybe a little bit faster.
Yeah, and I mean that's because I have it set not to be. So to be clear, we're talking about the M27 right now, and I have it set not to be on auto completely crazy in case I actually do want to put it on auto. I have the LMG set to even a little lower than that.
Mhm.
I because of the HPS, like I can set it to fire at the rate of the actual real thing if I want to, which is comparatively for an airsoft gun quite low.
Mhm.
Um, but realistically, because it's literally a setting I can change in between games, which is one of the super cool things about the HPA setup. I'm gonna bring it on Saturday. I might actually run it exclusively on Saturday, because
Mhm.
I can set it to single shot if I want to for like village games, which makes it a really really inefficient assault rifle functionally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like just to get used to like humping it and handling it for a protracted period, rather than that just being a thing that happens at the op. Or I'll bring both and run both because the M27 is too much fun. um,
Yeah. Well, but
to
I was
to
curious
quote
about that because
the Beach Boys, you can't leave your best girl home on a Saturday night.
yeah, that's yes, you're damn right about that. I think the reason I brought this up is because I remember back when I was first foraying into MOSFET territory, the Raptor MOSFET, and turning that down just because it sounded so vicious. I thought it was great, but I think that one of the things that I really took away from Iron Horse was the effectiveness of the LMGs in that context, where you don't have everyone being able to run on semi, but also that if you have like two SSWs who are like talking, right? So like one is firing, the other one is firing, and the other one's firing back and forth and back and forth. You could put a lot of fire down and keep a lot of heads down with actually a pretty limited amount of ammunition, especially if you're going to be running, like, well, if Josh has a box mag, that's great. But if you don't have a box mag, it's going to be hard for you to keep up with him if he's shooting 30 rounds a second and you're trying to do the same.
Totally, right? But like, if we're doing that, we should be doing sort of like 3 or 4 or 5 round, 8 round bursts anyway. And like on 5 round bursts, and like I'm not setting the gun to that, I'm going to have it on auto, but just like on a burst where I'm shooting 5 rounds, most trigger pulls, like a 250 round box will last me a while. And yelling reloading at Josh so he just holds the trigger down for an extra couple of seconds while I fumble a new mag in, probably also fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it probably works. And like, again, one of the cool things this coming weekend is like we're both going to be there. I should actually message him and make sure he brings his Mark 46, but I can't imagine he won't. He's having too much fun with it. And just try to like get a game where we actually both like run both of them and see what that feels like for people. And I don't mean that in the sense of like them finding it bad and us not doing it anymore. I mean in the sense of and figure out how to make them feel bad.
yeah, exactly. Like practice, right? Essentially.
Exactly. I want to be able to use the two of these, like two working LMGs on auto in a field where other people can't run auto, backed by 3 or 4 of our guys with rifles, should feel really oppressive for the opposing team in any situation where like where we can provide a base of fire that fixes them with the LMGs and then flank them with the riflemen. Like that should be awful.
Yeah, assuming they don't have their own LMGs, which they definitely will.
Yeah, totally. Like for the op, yes, absolutely. But it's definitely going to be.
Oh yeah, on Saturday.
On Saturday,
it's gonna be,
right?
Yeah.
And also for the op, like it feels like one of those things where people, like we'll be doing that. And if it turns out that there's a huge advantage to having the 2 machine guns together in one place, then we probably will have interesting. Like our team leaders will have interesting strategic and tactical decisions to make about where to place us and how to get us working.
So this is really interesting because this is something that I've been meaning to talk to you about, because really, this is probably the first game that you have played as a just regular player, maybe ever.
So you ran some ops back in the day at Redcliffe, and so did a couple other people where we all got, like, there were a couple of people who weren't on our team who actually ran ops, which was magical, and we all got to play together. But
really?
Once.
I
but it
do
was
not remember that.
It's been, a minute since I got to play in a scenario game as a player. And so, yeah, like it involves a bunch of, sorting myself out in a way that isn't necessarily the case, so like, I need to, like, I haven't done any of it yet because it's Monday and it's 2 weeks from the game. But like, I have a to-do list of stuff that I need to pick up. So like my propane is out, so I need to pick that up so I can refill mags and like pistol mags and grenades and just have them working. Because that's super important. I've got 2 different airsoft frags, but like I would like to have both of them on my kit and running for the day.
Yep.
Because realistically, just those are useful tools. So I have to tinker with like my actual, like where I have stuff rigged. Like I've got at least 1 mag pouch that I can probably take off and replace with a pouch for a grenade. Like it's a single, and I'm like, how much use am I really getting out of that? So that's the thing I need to / get to tinker with. I have a checklist of like, okay, so I need either to go buy a hydration bladder because mine is defunct, or like figure out a better way to carry water than like having 2 of these in a spawn zone. Or not. Like, I mean, we're gonna have a fob sort of area, so like maybe that.
But I mean, it's an interesting consideration for you, because like you've never, in recent memory, you haven't played a game where if you don't get hit, like you're not going back to fob necessarily. Like you're just
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you can go back to fob at any time. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah, but
right? Like
I
if you're
want,
out there and
but
you're
yeah, I
parched,
want to be pushing all day, every day, right? Like,
yeah,
so,
exactly.
like the pack that I'm carrying my water in has space for like a medium, even a large, but I don't want like a 4 liter hydration bladder because it'll be super heavy. So that's the
Mhm.
thing. I know it's going to be hot as hell because it's the end of August here, and like I mean, not hot, but comparison to like places that actually get hot, but like it'll be 30 Celsius for a chunk of the game.
Yeah, it could certainly get
Um,
that hot. Yeah,
you know, I mean, yeah, like come day of and it's like 12, but like, um, I can prep for the heat and just put a sweater in the car for the for the cold. Like this is an easy thing, you know. But the um words. I also need to pick up snacks, right? Like I need portable calories. They need to be portable calories, like that won't mess with my guts.
yeah. I was gonna say
Like
that you can eat, and also, maybe that you want to eat. You know what?
yeah,
Like
like
both of those
yeah,
things.
something that's not awful is definitely
Yeah,
important. And like I have, as we've talked about before, I have colitis. I want to be playing for 3 hours, which means it needs to be something that's not going to send me to the loo.
yeah,
Um, you know, and like for context for people who don't have anyone in their life with this sort of stuff, or like are like, what does that mean? So like a really common thing amongst our crew to bring for stuff like this is like a protein bar, right? Compact calories, tastes kind of okay, goes in your mouth real quick. I said kind of
yeah,
okay, like
yeah.
what do you want?
But it's fast for
um,
sure, 100% convenient.
and they're designed to be a energy source for protracted ongoing physical activity. Sick. Those destroy me.
Yeah,
And most other people with any irritable bowel stuff, like they're just no.
yeah. So you'll
um
be like doing honey or like candy or probably
yeah,
stuff like that. Yeah,
honey, Werther's original because I'm an old man.
yeah.
You know, there are a couple of brands of granola bar from like store shelf granola bar that don't mess with me. So, a couple of those for like the feeling of having something more solid than candy in my guts. You
It's
know,
really interesting because the crossover with like some of the other activities that I do, and as well as airsoft, it's like when like when we went to Iron Horse, or when I'm doing a race or whatever, you never try anything new. It always has to be stuff works because you can't afford. I mean, this is a 3 hour game, so like we can it's but if this was like a full like 6 hour event or whatever, like you don't want to be wasting any of that time.
totally.
Um, away from your team, number one, for sure. But, especially in physical discomfort, like, Johnny blowing a tire or whatever in like the first 20 minutes and having to sit down for an hour. Like, that's not great if you can avoid it, right?
Yeah,
So
totally. And like
yeah.
I have a decent understanding of like how far I can push myself in
Hmm.
most directions. I'm definitely um, I mean, it's one of the goals for the summer anyway, but I'm definitely exercising more. And like that wasn't really in prep for the op, but like I'm glad in the sense that I will be in, better condition for it. Better
Hmm.
cardio, a bit stronger. Just, like humping the LMG is not a big problem for me, but 3 hours straight of doing it is definitely like, oh yeah, my arms will be sore. It will be better if I do some more push-ups.
It's
um,
interesting because one of the things that I'm really curious about for you in particular is that you are a thinker in terms of like you've always been behind strategy, right? So we've played games, and this is not to say that like if you're rolling with Cal or maybe if you're rolling with Jason, I don't know, you're gonna tell them, hey, no, figure it out yourself. I'm not helping. Like I don't imagine that
yeah, no, I
being a
mean,
thing.
like,
But like ultimately, a lot of this, it's not just the planning, it's the execution, and like you're gonna be leaning heavily, or they're gonna be leaning on you on the execution side because number one, um, you are going to be the SSW, the squad support weapon, which means you're going to have to support the squad in what they need to accomplish. So you're going to be part of the doers, not just the thinkers. And that's not, I mean, it's not that you don't do that, but never in this context. I
yeah,
feel
I
like this is
mean,
going to be new for
a
you.
ton of my, a ton of my play, really like, um, I switched around when I switched to HPA. I switched over to like having my rifle be at a rifleman FPS so that I could push up with everyone where and when needed. But like the accuracy and consistency of my kit and the general like build I'm running makes me a really good second line. So I'm used to providing a kind of support by fire. We'll be providing a slightly different kind of support by fire, and we'll probably need to be closer in because I won't have as much range. The LMG currently is built with a very short barrel. Like it's not, or it might surprise me, but like I don't think it's going to be like super accurate. I think it's going to be pretty accurate for what it is, but like, you know, there's a lot of range there. So I'll have to be further up. You know, it's also one of these things where like these are not a tool to lead from the front. I think. Again, if I'm wrong, let me know. Preferably before the 17th of August.
I think you lead from the side. I think it's not the
like,
front. It's lead from the side and like observe. I think talking with Jordan, who does a lot of, you know, like that's what he does with with the pairs. You know, it's a lot of like being aware of what's going on in the field and sharing that information with the team. You know, that's the other form of support. It's not just support by fire, but it's support by intel. But you know, to come back to what, you know, what you have done, I think the big difference here is the and then, right? Because like when we play games, it's like, okay, let's go to that berm, you know, blah blah blah, and it's like, okay, and then the game's over.
Yep.
Right? But now it's going to be like, okay, well, we got to do this thing, and then what? Because the way that we have at least the way that I have the game designed, hopefully, teams will not be always in the same spot. Like they're going to have to move around, presumably, try and find the stuff that we have hidden on the field.
Yep.
Unless your commander decides, hey, we're not doing that, which, okay, but like that's not how you win the game. So whatever. So it's going to be like that's the part that I think is going to be it's curious for me. Like I'm just curious to see how, not just like how you do, you're going to do fine. Like you've been playing Airsoft for long enough. It's just an Airsoft game. Like you're not going to Iron Man. Like this is fine. But like I'm curious how you enjoy it. I think that's the big thing.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder what you're going to think of it not being in the big boss shoes for a game like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because like we've talked before on the podcast a very long time ago about the fact that like some days I show up and I don't necessarily want to be functioning in any kind of leadership role. And I've worked really hard to get over that because at this point, you know, one of the functions on field, but also just one of the things we want our team to be good at is acting as sort of combat leaders as a force multiplier kind of thing. And so I feel like whatever team we're on, the team lead's going to end up relying on us to run like some chunk of our team to run about half of the guys on our team, right? So if that's me, cool. If it's not me, I'm still probably going to be giving a bit of direction to like the people in my immediate vicinity, partly because if I go, all right, I'm this area of the field is my current, you know, cone of fire, go around it and deal with those guys. People need to do that, right? And I need to be communicating effectively. So like there's some practice stuff there. It's funny, you know, I've been thinking about like what do I want to add to my Airsoft kit across like the last few months. Like it's one of the themes of the summer for me is sort of thinking about my Airsoft kit critically. Not in a like I don't think it's working well way, but in a like even better ifs. And one of the things I think actually is pretty close to the top of my my to-do list, and that it's also kind of the thing that I want to talk to like our team about collectively, is getting a couple of more radios of like good radios, preferably with like a decent handset that we can just toss at people at ops when we're running with them. Just to be like, okay, hey, take this, run it, give it back at the end of it, but like I want comms, so here are comms.
Yeah.
You know, and that again probably isn't going to happen for this op because I haven't ordered.
It's cool that you mentioned the radios, because I think at Iron Horse, that's something that our platoon leader did that I thought was really smart. Is he had, I mean, expensive. I get it. We don't have to be that expensive, but he had digital radios for each squad and the RTO, and he just gave them to you so that way he never had to worry about getting in touch with anybody because everyone had squad comms because he gave them to the players. I think that's a really good idea that you're bringing forward there, and I think like we should definitely do that. It doesn't have to be super expensive.
Well,
right?
and like especially in terms of like as I'm thinking about it for like I would like to have been able to do it for this op, but like my budget just due to other stuff doesn't stretch there right now. My dumb
Yeah.
things budget is otherwise occupied. um, so or maybe not dumb things, but like my fun money is otherwise occupied.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So it's a thing of like I would like to have a couple because it will make life easier. As a team, having more would be great. I also think it will matter a lot more for the longer op this fall. And like, I don't know at this time if I suspect because it's a longer op that I'll probably be working to support you and like doing that rather than playing, but we'll see.
Mhm.
And I have no problem with that. But honestly, if I have a couple of spare radios, even if I'm operating as support, then I can still like look at one of our guys and go, hey, huck these at a couple of players, get them back after.
Yeah.
And like,
So
like you said, it doesn't have to be super expensive, right? Like we don't need really high quality radios for the field size, right?
definitely, we could just do like Motorola's or whatever.
Yeah.
I want to come back to this op though. I'm curious from your perspective, what is the thing that you are the most concerned about? What is the thing that you are most I say concerned, like worried, whatever you want, however you want to say it, that's weighing on your mind the most.
So, um, making sure that like I and any of my teammates in immediate proximity, and I don't mean by teammates in this case, I don't mean Storm Riders, I mean people on my team,
Mhm.
you know, are in the game and effective for the full 3 hours. Because like I know people, I watched people burn out pretty quick at the last op.
Mhm.
I watched people go, okay, like I'm going for 30 minutes and then I'm going to come back to the zone, safe zone when I get shot, and I'm going to sit here for 30 minutes. And it's like, so we want to try to minimize, I think we want to try to minimize that. I'm going to leave the planning aspects of some parts of that to my team lead, but like, the gummy candy or whatever it is that I end up bringing as like just quick sugar is going to be, it has to be shareable, right? Like just, yep, cool. Which is again not necessarily a leadership thing, but a like team play thing. In
Yeah.
terms of mechanical execution, because I don't know what spawn zone we're going to be or anything like that at this time because I'm not running it, which does feel weird. There are definitely places on the field that we don't want to get stuck. I
Mhm.
played, but the last time we played, I played a game using what has been one of our spawn zones for a couple of ops. For the first time in I think probably a year and a half, and it's terrible. And like there are alternative ways of dealing with it than the way that we dealt with it in the game that we were playing. Like the game that we were playing had limitations that made it I think even worse, but it's not a great spot to be stuck. So it's one of those like, okay, well, if we're going to be dealing with that field or that portion of the field, what else do we have to lock down? Right? If we're going to be dealing with any given chunk of the field, what do we have to lock down is primarily kind of the thing I'm trying to think through. Because I know it's going to have a lot of like moving around trying to find objectives and deal with stuff like that, more so than it is going to be focused on like capturing dirt, right? Like, okay, so I got 2 guys with LMGs and 4 rifles. Yeah, I can capture dirt, no problem. Right? Like,
Mhm.
you want the road, I will take the road and I will have it for as long as you like. That's a non-issue. As always at Frontline, I have like sort of like the personal issue of like, it's not the easiest terrain to move around in without eating dirt. So
Yeah.
like people need to avoid that. Like I actually think that like a medium pace will serve us pretty well to try to get through the 3 hours without anyone like getting completely gassed, right? Like we're going to need all of our players all of the time as much as possible, I think. And I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like that's true anyway, but yeah, it has seemed to me for the last few ops that that's about finding ways to motivate people. Leading from the front as much as possible is definitely going to be one of those ways. And like, I don't mean that as a criticism to the folks who've been running teams for the last few ops. The the struggles of like getting a bunch of airsofters to work together as a team when they don't normally even think about it is a real thing.
Mhm.
So how are we going to approach that? And like, some of that's going to be, okay, what does my team leader want to do? Because they're in charge. But like, what can I do to facilitate that? So like, what can I do to make a 4-man fire team that I'm with as effective as possible, as motivated as possible, and as doing what we need to be doing to win as possible.
So what can you do?
Keep,
Right? You talked about like candy and stuff, but like you ask a really good question, but also you don't answer the question.
yeah, but
So I'm curious to hear
like,
your answer to the question.
so
Like
but
what
like
can you do from your perspective?
positive, having a positive attitude is really good, right?
Mhm.
Reminding, because I know some of the guys that we play with are very sprinty. Like, okay, so cool, that's great if we need to go somewhere really, really fast, and sometimes we will, but like, don't necessarily sprint out the gate to get to nothing, right? I think that people are going to expect that we need to, for example, like find and control the choke point into the village for a chunk of the day, and they're going to be like, "Oh, let's do that right away." The scenario doesn't necessarily serve that, right?
Mhm.
So we need to, um, to to pull from the best advice anyone ever gave anyone who plays tabletop miniatures games with toy soldiers. Think about your objectives and accomplish the objectives. Right? Like, this is not particularly a game mode about holding dirt. It's a game mode about taking what we need, when we need it, how we need it. And so, yeah, it's a lot of like, okay, what can we do to create lines of approach? Okay, well, we've got 2 light machine guns, or 4, 2 per 10.
Yeah, if you have 20 players, then you'll have four,
I'm
right?
I'm assuming a ballpark of 20 players a team. We'll see.
Mhm.
So if we got 20 players a team, and I've got, we've got 4 LMGs to work with. Okay, we probably split those. um, you know, but yeah, a lot of it is morale, right? So keeping people in the fight is going to be about being positive, about being cheerful, about making sure we're all having fun and remembering that this is fun, and about, yeah, like playing to our objectives and going, hey, this is plan A. What do we do with plan A?
Yeah. Um what is your controllable that you're most going to be most focusing on, right? So like, it's great that we can talk about okay, motivating other players and stuff and like but really you can't control how they
Yeah.
respond to any of it.
So
What is your controllable that is the number one thing that you want to not necessarily work on, but that you're keeping your eye on? Because I know it's not going to be your reloads cuz like that's just
yeah, like the
whatever,
basic
right?
mechanical skills stuff, I have down enough. I think
Yeah,
the reloads will be
exactly.
a little different because I'm using an LMG and it reloads slightly differently, but it's not really that much more complicated. um,
Mhm. So what's your controllable? Like what's the thing that you're most keeping your eye
so
on?
like for me, it's got to be about, and like, from playing with me for years that I'm a stubborn human being about this stuff. But like, I need to be in the game and I need to be on my game the whole day. Right.
Mhm.
So I don't get to be lazy about getting into cover. I don't get to be lazy about like moving around when I need to move around. I need to be playing, fairly aggressively, but also ideally at a pace that is sustainable so that I'm not like, my legs don't fall off halfway through.
Mhm.
Right. Because, like at the end of the day, um, objective based stuff like this is going to be a lot of moving about and then immediate violence of action stuff and then going somewhere else and repeating that process.
Mhm.
So, keeping the LMG fed, not super concerned. My Odin is in my bag anyway, so like reloading shouldn't be too bad as long as there are lulls and like we have stuff like that. But like rotating us around to get breaks and stuff will be really important, I think. Depending on how play actually works out. We only have so much field to go look for stuff in.
Yeah.
I also know, like, from a skill set point of view, like watching people move around and like reporting on that, definitely not going to be a problem. Finding weird stuff that you've hidden places, not actually my best skill. um, you know, so for example, if I know that, and I do, John's pretty good at that. What can I do to make sure John is doing that while I'm keeping people's heads down? Right. Um, you know, it's all about, or at least I think it's going to be all about, making sure, like, job one is make sure I am still up, still good, still combat effective for as much of play as possible, and that I'm providing the force multiplier that I'm there to be, um, both in terms of like the combat leadership aspect, but in terms chiefly of like, yeah, I've got an LMG.
Mhm.
um,
It's funny because all I can think about is like constant vigilance because I think for you in particular, one of the things that, we've talked about this before, it's not a dig and you just talked about it is you get complacent, right?
totally.
Because it's like, oh, I don't need to worry about cover, I don't need to worry about this, but like I feel like at these events, not everyone, but certain players definitely come to play, right? There's some people in our community we know, like, it's just like, whatever, man. Like, I'm just here to have a good time. And that's great. Like,
Totally.
don't get me wrong. But then there are guys who, when it's game time, it's game time, right? And they like if you it's kind of like the only analogy, and apologies, I'm wearing my best Canadian shirt, but it's like hockey versus in the regular season versus the playoffs, right? Like whatever happens in the regular season does not matter in the playoffs because those teams are just completely different animals. And I feel like we have some of those players in our community too, who when they show up, based on my observation, they're just like they're on,
Yep.
and if you make a mistake, they're going to make you pay.
Totally.
And so I feel like your observation is good, and I'm glad to hear you say it because I do think that that's something that it's a challenge. You know, it's not that it's like, oh, Pat sucks at this. People suck at this. Like being on for 3 hours,
Yeah.
not easy.
I mean, like,
right?
yeah, and like it's one of those things where, you know, to use a fighting game analogy here, that should work. You know, you can be playing a fighting game and not be playing, right? Like you can be, I'm spectating. My hands are moving, my character is doing stuff, and I am not actually playing the game. I'm just reacting. I'm just
going through the motions. Yeah.
Or you can be, okay, my brain is on, I am engaged. I have a plan. I am trying to execute that plan. I am responding to what happens while we play.
Yeah.
You can play a skirmish game of Airsoft on autopilot, right?
Oh,
especially,
man, have I ever done
especially
that?
if you've done, if you've done your ready ups and stuff, like it's okay, cool. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to fill this hole in the line. I'm going to react to what I see and shoot it. I'm going to let other people execute the play more, and I'm just going to go burp, right? Or pew,
I mean, not
whatever.
even like village game. I'm on fish tubs. Game whistle blows. Run to the right corner. Put fire down. Put fire down. Hit one guy. Run across to the blue building. Put fire down. Run behind the car. Get behind the 2-store. Like, how many times have I done that?
Yeah.
Right? I can do that just in my sleep. Right? And so I totally get your point. Like, I could, if I, and I've done this not more than one time where I'm like not really paying attention. I'm just doing everything as the way that I always do. And, sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But I think for you in this context, I think the challenge is going to be the fact that the objectives are not connected to like holding dirt, like you're talking about. Like you're gonna have to find these cases, and I'm going to hide them so well.
And like,
right, and well, Jeremy's going to help me, and the directive that I've given him is we are going to have to take pictures and mark on the map where we hid them because we might not be able to find them again. Like that's how well I want them hidden.
And like
right?
I mean, I sort of, despite you not telling me that, I knew that, right?
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, I mean, the practical goal there becomes, like I said, okay, so we need to be moving around the field. We need to be moving around the field as effectively and efficiently as possible while taking no casualties if we can manage it, right? Like both in game terms, I want players not at respawn. I want them in the field doing the thing. And I want no one breaking an ankle, right? So we need to facilitate that as much as we can. And like, I'm not the team lead. I'm not running the show. Not a problem. But like for anyone who I'm sort of like working with, we're going to try to run that sensibly, and also, yeah, we all have to try not to be spectating because it's going to be a different game mode, right? For me, one of the things that I think is actually going to help is that I'm going to be running the LMG, which I think is going to help literally in the sense that I haven't run the LMG in an op game. I'm not as I'm not as comfortable with being a squad support role with an LMG.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like functioning, going, okay, so I'm just going to set my rifle to DMR. I'll act as one of the team DMRs and just like do my thing would be much easier. Right? Like I'm completely, yeah, okay, sure, we can do that. We've done that a bunch, right? That is my normal role in games, or at least it was for ages. And it's been my role in op games where we've gotten to play in the past. Now, again, completely different rifle, long time ago, but like that's the comfortable pair of shoes. And this is going to be
I was gonna say, I'm curious to see how it works, but I do think you're right. Like I think it's gonna keep you in the game in a different way because you're gonna be engaged, well, literally and figuratively, and sort of it's going to break that monotony because you're constantly, hopefully, your team's going to be relying on you to feed them information. And if you're not able to answer that question, that's going to make it difficult, right? Or answer the moment, with your machine gun, whatever that
Well, and
is.
like any point at which, in addition to that, right? Like any point at which I'm not both keeping my head on a swivel, looking around and trying to like process and feed back to whoever I'm working for is information of like what's going on the field, and also putting down fire is a point at which I'm not really functioning as I need to be. Right. So like
Mhm.
Chris is a big fan
Yeah.
of, like literally walking by and going, Pat, are you effective? Right.
Yeah.
Um, and so the answer is going to be, okay, well, I will have to keep myself on task there. And like, that's, again, it's a skill we all practice and it's a skill we all have, but it's also like, yeah, 3 hours of, keeping my brain engaged on task is definitely going to be air quotes work.
Yeah.
I'm good at long periods of focus, because it's a thing I do for work, and fun. But like this is a different context for it, and definitely, yeah. Like the last time I ran, I think as part of a team for an op, I was the commander.
Yeah.
And so the problem set was very different and the function was very different, because if you're operating, like you're running a 6-hour game and you getting shot is worth points for the enemy team, then your use of personal skills is really limited. And so is your pushing your face into the fight. Right.
Yeah. Really.
Whereas for this, like my pushing my face into the fight is going to be the thing, right? That's what we
Yeah.
are here for. Let's get to it. I think,
I'm so yeah, I mean, I'm really curious to see how all this plays. I'm curious to do a part 2 with you after the op as well to
totally.
see how all of your assumptions have shaken out. You know what I
Yeah. And
mean?
like one of the things, I literally am thinking about as I sit here is going, man, I should like put a better red dot on that gun. Because currently,
Well, we can
oh yeah,
we
but
can
just in
erase
a
it.
like problem solving, because I'm like, oh yeah, because currently I've got a EOTech on it for looks, just because it's
Mhm.
the aesthetic. um I know a bunch of people are like, what aesthetic, Pat? The one from the like late 90s early 2000s action movies, that aesthetic.
Yeah, but that aesthetic also had a box mag,
Yeah,
so
well,
you're gonna have to pick one or the
yeah,
other.
fair, right? But I mean, I can borrow a box mag for photos.
Yeah, clearly.
Right. But yeah, like I think in terms of like snap shooting with it, it probably would be a good idea to actually have like a decent dialed in optic on it instead of a piece of garbage that looks cool. So I need to.
Well, you can have a Holosun if you want. I got one to spare, so
Sick. I might.
for this op
Yeah,
only.
yeah. I might do that. I might see what I have around, just because if I have something that's decent that'll fit on it that doesn't involve borrowing something, then that's easier
Yeah.
ish.
Well, listen, that's a good chat. I'm like I said, very curious to do a part 2, see how all this shakes
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Um,
In a couple of weeks, we'll laugh about how wrong or right I was.
yeah, for real. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. That's all we've got for you this week. Hopefully, you found this entertaining, and we will talk to you next week.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
And if you have any tips for being a squad support gunner, you got until the 17th to send them my way.